Right. So as you guys, if you've been here, we've been trying and seeking to honor. We've been seeking to honor seniors. Do we have the paper plate award?
They're running late,
Got
but
it.
they're coming. But we can do it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this week we're honoring somebody who, if you're not careful, you might not know him. And that's because he's really quiet and unassuming. And it's funny because me as a minister, I deal with lots of different personalities, lots of different people. And often I've learned and grown in this. Often I kind of think of people who aren't outgoing. I mean, especially when you first get to know him, he gets a little more outgoing as you get to know him. But I kind of say, I'm not sure if they're going to be involved. And by God's grace and to my not shame, but joy, Jonathan proved me wrong in that in a lot of ways. He's since the day he came, he's from out of state. He came here with no friends. He had an uncle here and kind of paved a new path. And I think by God's grace, found some friends here, but more than finding friends, he really invested here. He's been discipled. He's been a part of Bible studies. He's been overseas. God has really used you, man, to encourage me to see, to see how mighty he is and how he uses tons of different personalities, even the quiet ones, which is what I'm learning and actually becoming more as I get older. But super thankful for you, super impressed by your faith, super impressed by you finishing school and you finishing so well in our ministry. So I'm going to invite you up to say some things. I normally would have a paper plate right now, but I don't. And so why don't you just come on up and we'll get that for you at the end. Guys, this is Jonathan.
Hey guys. As Kyle mentioned, I kind of came here, didn't know many people other than my uncle, who gave me a place to stay, which is really generous of him. A lot of people ask me why I came out here to New Mexico, like from Massachusetts. And there's the usual reasons that I'll give, like the food's good, the weather's great, or tuition was cheap. But it's more than that. I was kind of looking to, stretch myself in certain ways. I didn't believe I could do while staying with my parents. My parents were great, but I wanted to rely internally more on God, I believe. And the BSU has been very instrumental in helping me discover more about God. I started out with Freshman Life Group, and that was I made a lot of good friends through that. But what really was a key in my walk, I think, was small groups that I was involved in that really affected my walk more than anything else. I think I encourage a lot of you guys to get involved in small groups, because that's how you really compare notes with other people about how to continue your walk with Christ. I did, and as Kyle mentioned, I went overseas. I did Project Impact, which is a summer trip out in Denver, and I was comfortable doing Project Impact, but originally I initially wasn't interested in doing Focus at first, and that was because I had this itchy question, well, what about the problems here? Aren't those important as well? And I kind of realized, I think this is kind of God showing me that those things are important too. The problems here in America are also very important. But God can use situations like going overseas to, stretch yourself and to allow God to work through you in new situations. And so that's that's kind of what I realized. And so that's why my senior year, I went ahead and did focus. So I do believe it helps. It allows God to use you in novel ways that you wouldn't think of otherwise. I'll leave you with this quote from James. It's James 1:16-17. It says, "So don't be misled, my dear brothers and sisters. Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, who created all things, created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow." And I think especially now, in this country, there's a lot of my truth, your truth, and a lot of people aren't satisfied with that. They're looking for the truth, and they're looking for people who will say that. God's the anchor point, and yeah, I think that's the truth that people need to know about. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
There's a chance that your paper plate award just
Follow
pulled
her.
into the parking lot.
There you
So
Go follow her. She'll get to you over there.
Not yet, but hopefully soon.
We'll present it at the end. Yeah. Our sound guys are camping this weekend. So if it freaks out, blame it on Micah. And if it doesn't freak out, I want all the credit. So, I mean, I think that was actually a perfect intro. So, Jonathan, again, so thankful for your time in our ministry. This is really a ministry that is completely dependent on college students. I know it seems like we as a staff do a lot, and my staff does a lot. I don't do very much, but they do a lot so that you can be freed up to grow in your walks with Christ and grow in your ability to minister, grow in your ability to trust Him, go overseas. And John, I mean, you just nailed it. Like, people want truth and people need truth. And the problem is they don't have truth, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about this evening, is people don't have truth. And so we have gone systematically through Genesis, and we just figured out Cain. And so we're watching sin, how it affects, right? And so first it affects individually. Adam and Eve messed up, right? And next to that, it affects their family, Cain and Abel, jealousy and murder. Right after that, you see Cain's line, corrupt, right? So on one hand, they're growing societies, but these societies are corrupt, and it kind of finds its apex in Lamech, right? This man who's boasting that if Cain was cursed, then I'm cursed 7 times more than him, basically, right? Just saying, like bragging about his debauchery. And then that brings us in to the story of Noah. And unfortunately, the story of Noah, it's just polluted. It's like swimming in a river in India. You're sure that there's some water in there. There's something here that's holding all of this trash and filth together, right? But the reality is you can't really see it. You can't understand it. And what it's from media. It's because when we were all in church growing up, Noah's Ark was painted on the walls in our nurseries, right? We've added things like, oh, Noah was laboring for 120 years with his sons as the the society around him was mocking him and telling him, why are you building this boat? That's not in the Bible, right? None of that's in the Bible. We add, like, we actually even want to make Noah the main character when Noah never even speaks in this story, right? Like, Noah never utters a word, right? So God is saying things to Noah, and the narrator shows us that Noah is moving. But the problem is with this story is we immediately think of animals. We immediately think of math, like how could all those animals plus the food fit on a boat like that? How long would it take? That would take a trillion years for that water to evaporate. What happened? So then we say, no, must have been miracles. So God was also doing all these miracles. And so we got math and miracles and all this stuff going on, but really none of that's here in the text, right? And again, as you have heard me say numerous times to this study in Genesis, I'm not afraid of theory. right? I like theories. I like thinking about how old the earth is. I like thinking about, was this flood a flood that covered the whole globe? Was it a flood that just covered like the known world? Because we talked how they thought the world was flat and all they saw was flat and they could only see this water that way on the horizon, this water that way on the horizon. And so in their minds and in their hearts and in their understanding, the world had flooded. I don't know. I think both of those have really valid arguments that can be drawn from the texts. But again, those discussions lead us away too often from the actual purpose of the text, from what the words are saying. And like we've been talking about these last 3 encouraging weeks, is the point of this text is that sin kills, right? And just like God said at the very beginning to Noah, to Adam and Eve, saying, hey, you eat of that tree, you'll die, right? The result will be death. We are now experiencing that over and over again. And so here we are. We're at the beginning of this story. And last week we read this, but I'm going to do it just to remind you of the setting and the thoughts of the main character of this story, which are God, right? And these are his thoughts. This is what he's looking down on the world. And he says, this is Genesis 5:6-8. The Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So really in this passage, you see hearts contrasted, right? So you see a glimpse of God's heart. And what's God's heart? What's happening? Showing mercy? Yeah, could you get that from Noah? Yeah, so he's merciful. He's desiring that not everyone should perish, and he's seeing some righteousness. And so he's not just blindly, like this is not a temper tantrum, right? Like that's what we need to know about God. God is completely in control and sovereign. We say that often, and he's completely in control of his emotions, right? He is not like the God of the ancient Greeks, where all of a sudden he just freaks out, throws a lightning bolt. Well, I was mad at the people on the earth because they were lazy and this and that. They were being too noisy. This is a very different God. We're seeing a God who's very mindful of the people on the earth, right? So he sees them and he sees Noah, right? So he has mercy, but he sees the rest and they have what? Like, what is he seeing? Yeah. Yeah, he's grieving, right? And so here's the funny contrast. So you have this God who is sovereign and in control of all things, ruling over the world, and they are completely ignoring him. No regard for him, right? They're not grieving over the lack of the worship and praise, over the relationship that was lost with Adam and Eve, over the understanding of Abel, right? When he brought a sacrifice in faith, over a life like Enoch's, right? Where God just took him to be with him because he was righteous in his days. They're not worried about faith. They're not worried about trusting God. Every thought of their hearts were only evil continually. So it's just crazy juxtaposition, right? Like you have this God who is super mindful of the world below, and it's grieving him, and the result, like he told Adam and Eve, of sin is death. And so he's about to bring that about on the world. And like we talked about last week, it's not like these were like little devils with horns and tongues coming. Like we just tend to almost over make these people evil. Like, no, they must have been way worse than what we see today, right? They must be way worse. So that's God's perspective. This is what Jesus says in Luke. He also says a similar thing in Matthew. So Luke 17:26 says this: just as it was in the days of Noah. So Jesus is kind of talking about the sin of their time, right? The sin that he's experiencing and seeing. And he says this: just as it was in the days of Noah, it will be in the days of the Son of Man. They were eating and drinking and marrying and being given in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Okay, so this isn't this like hissing, biting, mocking generation that's throwing rocks at Noah while he's making this boat and he's walking around like little demons and like this and that. No, they're having weddings, right? They're having parties. They're total. It's not that they're just like evil in everything that they're doing, but they are so evil that they don't even think about God. They have no regard for him. So you just kind of have this imagery of a wedding being held while the rain starts to fall, and them kind of thinking, this too shall pass, this is no big deal, and the end of that is the entire wedding party floating, right? And not just the wedding party, every human known to man at the time floating, right? Just no regard for God, no thought of him, no thought that anything, I mean, no regard for how fragile they are and how fragile society and life is. But God has regard for them. He's grieving over their sin, right? And like Ty talked about, and having mercy, right? So we see this thread. Adam and Eve were not totally eliminated, right? God had mercy. Abel had faith, right? So God accepted his offering in faith. Enoch walked with God, and we're about to learn that Noah walked with God. And so we have this God that loves people, that's mindful of people, that's seeing people destroy the earth that he created, and more than that, destroy each other. And so he rightfully judges, but he also saves, right? And so with that context, we need that context, right? Because we need to know, like, if you're going to think about Noah's Ark, you got to think rightfully about God, right? If God is just this temper tantrum person in the sky that sees this, and they're not giving me what I want, and they're making me sad, so I just woke up today and I'm going to kill them, then you're missing God, right? And you're missing this story. If God is harsh and angry and just no love and no kindness, we kind of talked about that with the curses, right? This idea that God cursed us, we kind of think of, God, how could you? But we actually just really talked about how the curses were, it's basically God just saying, I told you so, right? Not in a mean way, but I told you if you ate of this, this would happen. And now this is how that's going to happen in your life, specifically men, in your life, specifically women, in your life, specifically earth, in your life, specifically Satan, right? Like God just fleshes out our own decisions. And that's happening again here. And I'll give you a peek at the end. The very fact that this pandemic has not wiped all of us out completely is mercy, right? Is this idea that we have a God who is mindful and loving towards the people that he created, and he genuinely desires none should perish, but that they'd follow him, right? So we're going to talk about how I feel like the U.S. is just prime for a Noah's Ark analogy. So we're going to read a lot tonight, and we started a little late, we're dragging a little bit, so I'll try not to go too long, but we're going to read through chapter 8. Because the story is kind of together. I didn't want to drag it out all summer, because then we wouldn't have been able to finish it. So let's start in Genesis chapter 6, starting in verse 9, because we read the verses above it. And we'll read and we'll talk, and we'll read and we'll talk. So these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Japheth, Happeth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you're to make it. The lengths of the ark are 300 cubits, its breadth 50, and its height 30. Make a roof for the ark, and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all the flesh in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds according to their kinds, of the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come into you to keep them alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is eaten, and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. So what's here? What's in this first section? Anything stick out in particular? Just blab it out.
I think it's interesting that it says Noah walked with God in the same way that it says that Enoch walked with God.
Yeah, same language, right? What else does it say about Noah?
Blameless in his generation.
Yeah, blameless in his generation. What do you think that means?
like he kind of stood out from the rest of his generation. I guess like an example of walking with the Lord, kind of like standing alone amongst them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, like, so does this? I mean, is the author of Scripture saying that Noah was a perfect person without sin? So what is he referring to? Yeah. Right. I mean, we've been talking about that over and over again. And so it's hard for us New Testament believers, like faith, but Jesus wasn't there. How does he have faith? Right. And we know, right, and Abraham's going to also trust God, right? He's going to hear God say, go out, and he's going to say, okay, and start walking with a old lady and a bunch of goats or something, and like into the desert. And later on, we're going to learn in the New Testament that God accredited to him as righteousness, right? So Abraham believed God. He had faith in God. He walked with God, and that accredited to him as righteousness. So, I mean, this can be a blunder because it's like blameless. But if you look at it, every time that Noah is spoken highly of, it's always in comparison to his generation, right? And so really we're getting this picture of this man, just like Wyatt said, who stood out in his generation. And that standing out meant he had an ear and a desire to know God, to walk with God, to be with God. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if Noah had a little church with a steeple. I don't know if Noah was a missionary. Like we all want to, I think we all want to draw out lessons like be like Noah, right? Like what? Have faith like Noah, build an ark like Noah, bring your animals in like Noah, get drunk in a tent like Noah, right? Like we all want to have that. But the reality is this story really doesn't present us with kind of that good moral lesson, that good example of what we can walk in. The story's broad, right? And it's setting one person up against all of mankind. And the thing that made him righteous is that he walked with God. Right? He loved him, and that contrasted him with the rest of the world. And here's what's dangerous and sneaky. Like I think most of us in here would say we walk with God, but the problem is that doesn't have much contrast, right? Like there's not much contrast in our lives from the world. And I don't know, you're a pretty good group. I like this group, and I trust this group is growing and walking in righteousness. But this is a good reminder for me to desire to like know God, right? Not just be on the boat, not just do the things that God does or I think I should do, but to genuinely desire to walk with him and to know him and to get to know him. Okay. And so that's what we know about Noah. It's a terrible generation that loves sin, right? God sees this sin and he rightfully hates sin, and he's about to judge it, right? So he tells Noah, hey, I'm going to make a covenant with you. I'm going to save you. I'm going to keep you, but you need to do these things. And I love it at the end. And Noah did this. He did all that God commanded, right? He just built a boat. I don't know if he was getting rocks thrown at him. I don't know if it took 150 years. I don't know. I mean, like there's easy ways to piece that together in scripture. There's lots of stuff here that you can kind of say, well, this seems to indicate this and that. But again, it's not the point, right? The point is God's about to judge. He hates sin. And Noah believed him and trusted him. Right. And so again, we get God as the main character. So God is speaking, the narrator's narrating, and Noah's just doing. Right. He's not asking God questions. He's not, grieving over the friends or this and that. He's not saying, well, how am I going to get polar bears? Are they even real? God was a polar bear, right? He's not doing that. He's not saying, well, how is this painting going to look on the nursery walls? Right. Like all Noah is doing is walking with God, hearing God, and obeying God and doing what he says. Right. And so let's look at the next section. And I think it's interesting. It says that God is going to destroy them with the earth. And if you remember that, what did God bring people out of? The earth, right? So like you need to know, and the next sections in particular are very connected to the creation story. And that's what's so bizarre. We've been talking about that, right? Like we got the whole creation of the universe plus the whole destruction of the universe in 8 quick chapters. Right. And then it's insane because starting in chapter 12, we're going to have like almost 30 chapters on just one family. Right. Like, and so we know that the writer of this story is driving the train and he's trying to get to the solution, the promise, the Abraham promise of through you, all the nations of the world will be blessed. Right. And so but he's setting that up. He's filling us in. And so let's go on. This is chapter, I think this is 7 verse 1. Then the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his mate, and 7 pairs of the birds of the heavens, also male and female, to keep their offspring alive in the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights. And every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground. And Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came upon the earth. No. Where was I at? And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood, of clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of birds and of everything that creeps on the ground. Two and two, male and female, went into the ark with Noah, as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the waters of the flood came upon the earth in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month. On that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were open, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and all 3 wives of his sons, with them entered the ark. And they and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kind, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind. Does that all sound familiar? Every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, with all that was in the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. The flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark, and rose high above the earth. The waters prevailed and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep, and all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land, in whose nostrils was the breath of life, died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals, and creeping things, and birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. So what's here? What stuck out this go round?
It's always kind of weird to remember, like reading through this, how morbid it all is. Because you don't think about that when you look at, oh, there's some pictures. Yes,
Yeah.
animals and the flammograms. Yes, it's so cuddly, but it's not.
It's gruesome, right? Because there's 2 lions for the thousands that have drowned, right? Like there's 2 little alligators for all the rest that are dead, right? I mean, like, I don't know what. Anyway, but yeah, it's morbid and gruesome, right? Like this is a judgment. This is God bringing forth what he said would happen, right, on the earth. And this earth had become so violent that God decided that it needed to be destroyed, right? So in the last chapter, we talked about how men had gotten so evil that he shortened lifetimes, right? That he kind of brought it down to 120 years. And here we see that, man, this generation had become so evil and so off course that God decided, almost like a heavenly accountant, right? That it was time to act in such a way to rebalance good, right? Almost a way to start from scratch, right? This way to say, okay, this has gone too far and gotten too evil, and so he judges. That's what it says. All I see is evil, except for Noah, right? Doesn't even mention Noah's wife and his sons. He sees Noah, right? And he begins this massive flood that wipes out everything that has the breath of life. That's right. It's gruesome, right? It's like every time I think nurseries are catching on to this. Like this has been talked about a lot. So a lot of people are like rapidly like going over the boat and the giraffe neck coming over it because the giraffe neck's just peering down at a bunch of dead bodies, right? Or I think they should just hire someone to go put all the dead bodies in the water, right? That would be gruesome. But yeah, so this is not a children's story, right? Kids like animals and kids like boats, right? And so we put this together as a children's story, but this is actually God showing, I am very serious about sin. I don't joke about it, right? Like all those people not only drowned, but they're now spending an eternity in hell apart from God. They were judged guilty, rightfully, right? And we've been talking about it. Here's the sneaky thing. Right? Anyone, I guess, when none of us are going to a wedding or a party. So this isn't a great question to ask, but like all of us are going to leave here. What just social distance
Well,
fireworks?
Caleb's getting married.
Yeah, right. And so there's a family gathering, right? But like all of that in a way is still going on in our generation, right? We're marrying, we're giving in marriage, we're praying, and we're just like, oh man, God, that was old times. The flood was old times. But what we're going to remember is that actually God is going to destroy the earth again, right? Like it's coming. And that's what Jesus was alluding to, right? Like just like in the days of the Son of Man, just like Noah, just like in times of Noah, people are doing this and doing that. But guess what? It's coming back. Jesus used lots like a thief in the night, right? Like a master who's gone away and then comes back suddenly, right? Jesus said, he talks about often that God is coming back, right? And he often talks about the person who's surprised, right? There's just like that evil servant who is beating the master's people and this and that, and he comes back, and what does he find him doing? Evil, right? And he's alluding to it here, and so that's what we're going to kind of end on this evening, and that we're not ending yet, but we got to be careful, because if we're not careful, we're going to be just like the people in the days of Noah, right? Giving in marriage and taking in marriage, totally unaware of God's hatred of sin, right? And his justice and his love. And so what else do you guys see here?
He completely eradicated every single living thing, like we said a little bit ago, all flesh had become corrupt, not just man, but the animals had
Yeah.
been tainted by sin, so much so that he had to destroy every single one on the earth.
Yeah. So I don't know how sin affects animals, but I do know how we're in charge of animals, right? And like how God had decided to completely eradicate all the world that as we know it, right? And completely take them out. Yeah, it's a brutal scene. Anything else? Any other thoughts here? Yeah, Katarina.
Something like that stood out to me is he keeps saying like everything that like the breath of life.
Yeah.
Took it away, and it made me think back to Genesis 2 when we had gone over it. And when we studied that, you had mentioned that it was like when he gave us like the spirit, like the eternal like aspect
Yeah.
of us. And I don't know, I feel like when I think of that part in Genesis 2 where God is like breathing the breath of life into Adam, like it is just such like I don't know, like almost like a precious moment. Kind
Yeah.
of, like you just like to see like God and man and like him like breathing life into us. So to just know that he was taking that away like from his like this creation who like he loved and he created. Like I don't know, it's like it's just like it's heartbreaking to read it like that.
It's supposed to be. That's great insight, right? That's what I was going to end this section in, is this breath of life was a gift from God to this world, right? And like that's why God was grieving. Okay, and so in this story, we think of this as a wrath-filled, like don't get me wrong, God does and will and did pour out his wrath. But man, he is thinking of that moment when he he is like that moment when he knew what have you done, right? Pushing people further and further away from his presence, right? Until what ultimately happens, right? He's still there, but who's not? All of creation, right? And so they had gone so sinful. So if you remember Adam and Eve out of the garden, right? Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel, so Abel was cast away even further from God. And we get this picture of these societies that are growing further and further away from God, to the point where now God, it's no longer distance, right? But it's death. It's death that he pushes them away with because they deserved it, right? But here's the thing, God's heart was grieving because, that very breath of life that he poured into them, that animated them past just mud creatures into soul bearers, into image bearers like him, put on this earth to rule and reign and love and grow and fill, right? Had gotten so evil that was no longer possible, right? Like that was no longer possible. So we just talked about it. The flood comes, rains came up and something came down. Flood came up and they all drowned. And so it's just a weird thing that kids like this story. All the kids died. It's crazy. Anyway, so I know I might be so morbid. I don't want to be morbid. Anyway, and so the reality is God is judging sin, but as if you our ministry long enough, we like, we like the word but, right? Because in it is always a precious reminder of the gospel of God. I mean, but God in Scripture. Anytime you see that, you should just underline it, highlight it, read above it and below it, because that's an indication that something is happening that no one else could do. Right? Something like all of this sorrow, this shame, this sadness, this death and destruction is happening, but God. Right? And so here we get a glimpse of that. So let's read. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained. The waters receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the water had abated. In the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. And the waters continued to abate until the 10th month. In the 10th month, and on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. And at the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent forth a raven. It went to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. Then he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground. But the dove found no place to set her foot, and she returned to him to the ark. For the waters were still on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand and took her in and brought her in the ark with him. He waited another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came back to him in the evening, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the waters had subsided from the earth. Then he waited another 7 days and sent forth a dove, and she did not return to him anymore. In the 601st year, in the 1st month, in the 1st day of the month, the waters were dried from the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Then God said to Noah, "Go out from the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth." So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by families from the ark. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird, and offered the burnt offering on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, "I will never again curse the ground because of man. For in the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease." So what's here? That's the last passage we're going to do this evening. That's it. What sticks out?
It takes a lot of faith to like sacrifice an animal right off the bat. You know, like there's only 7 goats or whatever. It's like, all right, let's shoot our chances on.
Yeah.
And like just at the end, like that is a really cool promise. Like, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease.
That's right.
That's right.
What hope? While the earth remains. Right. What else?
I was just more of a question.
Mhm.
Like, why would he spend so much time describing like all the dove and the raven and all that? Like, why?
Yeah.
Because he spends like more time describing that than like the time.
That's an interesting question, and I don't know the answer to that. The raven was sent out. The dove is kind of given that 3 times. I don't know if a lot of people connect this to Jesus and Peter. Just kind of that imagery of 3. There's the Trinity. There's lots of things that are kind of swirling around that. But that story of Peter when they're on the beach and Jesus gives him kind of 3 chances to repent. And so 3 is kind of an important number in the scriptures, but I don't have a great answer for why spending so much time, except for kind of like describing that the earth is becoming more and more able. Because I forget, there's something about olives. They grow in valleys. They're really resilient. And so whenever he found whenever it came back with that, he knew it was safe to go. But I really don't know. I don't know why that was put in there so prominently. Yeah, because he does skip over a lot of stuff, but we get a lot of info there. That's a good question. I mean, this is when math and miracles comes in, right? Because some people are like, well, do you know how big that ark would have to be to have food? Because that's like 100, that's like a year and a couple of months that they're on this ark. So food for them and all these animals, plus only 7 of them, plus cleaning out all their pens. Like someone, I mean, there's all this math out there that's like these people had to work 74 hours a day to accomplish all this work that needed to be happened, to care for these animals, to get them the food, to clean out their pens. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Well, it's God, it's miracles. All these miracles are happening. Like all of those are coming from places where we don't have answers from the scriptures, right? And the reason why we like to latch on to stuff like that, I think, is because because we don't want to latch on to this horrible judgment of God, right? Like we don't, as humans, like thinking about what sin brings about, right? We don't want to consider a God who is perfect, right? We like God to kind of give us all that we want, and that's how I'm going to close here in a second. But first, I want to mention this. If you look at it, it's very close to the creation story, right? And so if you're reading this, but God, in the beginning, God, right? But God remembered, and then you go through it, and it unpacks the animals, and let's see what it does. A wind over the earth. Remember, the Spirit was over the earth, water subsiding, and earth appearing, right? Like there's the dove hovering over the earth, like the Spirit was hovering over the earth. There's another little thought to that. Like the Spirit was hovering over the earth during creation. The dove was kind of hovering over the earth while it was being recreated. Birds and animals all brought out and commanded again to fill the earth and multiply. And then honest worship, right? Like Adam and Eve worshiping God, living with him. Noah coming off the ark and just making the sacrifice to God that pleased him, right? It was almost like a new creation, almost like the old was gone and something new was going to happen. Okay. And so we get this ebb and flow that's coming from the writer. Okay. So Abel, like, oh, remember Eve said, God has given me a man. Maybe this is the one that's going to crush the snake. But actually another man crushes that man, right? And then next we see Enoch. Maybe this is him, but God takes him. Next we see Noah, right? And maybe this is him. And so at the end of this scene, we have this fresh, beautiful world. I don't know if it's beautiful, but the animals are kind of coming off the ark. Noah is making the sacrifice. God is pleased. There's hope. There's hope again. And I think the writers of the New Testament and ultimately God is super intentional of building our hope and then crushing it. Building our hope, crushing it, right? Building our hope. So just enough for us to remember the promises, right? Just enough to make us think, is this the one? Is he, could it be? Oh, no, not him, right? Not him. And Noah's actually going to let us down next week, right? We're going to learn that very quick, that this new, fresh, cleansed earth is super dangerous still, right? And it's not because God, but it's because us. And so we talked with Cain and Abel, the rapid nature of sin. Over these last couple of weeks, we talked about Noah, the results of sin, which last week were death and destruction, and he died, and he died, and he died. And then this week was judgment, right? God judges sin. That is a result of sin. And then next week with the Tower of Babel and the continued ebb and flow of this mess, we're going to talk about the resiliency of sin. Just how it's like COVID on steroids, right? It just won't go away. And what I want to talk about a little bit is, let me read this. This is the end of that Luke passage. So it will be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. On that day, let the one who's on the housetop with his goods in his house not come down to take them away. And likewise, let one who is in the field not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to preserve his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will keep it. I tell you, in that night, there will be 2 in one bed. One will be taken, the other left. There will be 2 women grinding together. One will be taken, the other left. And they said to him, where, Lord? He said to them, where the corpse is, the vultures will gather. So it's crazy because God created from chaos, right? He created everything. Remember, we talked about how water was it just signified chaos in the ancient world. Their boats could go a little out to do some fishing, but much past that, it was terrifying, right? And so it was this idea of chaos and destruction and fear. And then God actually used chaos to destroy chaos, right? And it's very symbolic. There's lots going on here. But one thing I want to encourage us with this evening and challenge you with is Noah believed God and got on the boat, and that means he left everything behind, right? He left his job, his house, all of the things that he holds on to. I can just imagine the people, and like when the water began to rise, kind of their possessions and the things that they were seeking to hold on to, gripping and floating with them until it just they succumb to death. And I feel like America has so associated comfort with blessing, right? Like peace in my life with a good relationship with God. I'm really nervous, right? Like what COVID, we got social and racial unrest right now. If you're not privy to it, like the church is no longer enjoying. Like I'm a 35-year-old white male from a lower middle class family. I'm married and I have 3 kids. Back in the day, I was set. Oh, and I'm a Christian, right? Like I could just cruise, right? Like anything I wanted, any position I wanted. Like it was the dream, right? And the reality is that's changing. And in some ways, really, that's good. It's good that that's changing, that the playing fields are being equal, that some are being brought down and some are being brought up, because that's kind of the gospel, isn't it? Like we talked about that in, I think it was Ephesians, like those of you who are up here and thinking highly of yourselves, you need to be humble. And those who are thinking too low of yourselves, you need to come up, because we're all the same in the gospel. But here's my point. If you associate the blessing of God with comfort and ease of life, the flood is coming, right? It's coming. Okay. And whether or not it's in this generation, in this time, in this country, like Jesus has said that this earth will be destroyed, right? And when that starts happening, when the difficulty in life starts coming, and then you say, oh no, these things are being taken from me, therefore God must not be real. I mean, isn't that funny how that's our reaction when things don't go our way? God's not real. Okay, God's real, but he's mean. Okay, God's real and he's not mean, but I must have done something wrong, right? Because I'm not getting everything that I want. I'm not getting ease of life. Just remember, God owes us nothing, right? And instead of giving us nothing, he's given us the treasure of life, Christ, right? Like so God called Noah off the land into the boat, right? He's called us out of this world into his kingdom. Okay, and so I hope you don't grieve over the loss of this world, over sin, over wishing you had more. I mean, COVID has made me just wish I was rich so I didn't have to worry and I could just retire. And then people that are rich, I get mad at them. And then I get mad at God and say, why aren't I rich like them? And just this discontentment when God is like, Kyle, don't you see their poverty? Don't you see the destruction of things and stuff and how that's keeping them from me and knowing me? They don't regard me, Kyle, but you regard me, right? Don't you understand that Jesus is the treasure, right? I've called you out of the world to myself. And I just want to encourage you guys. This is a generation where Christianity is no longer popular, right? I actually grieve over my kids because I just remember pretty easy life. And I know that's changing, but I hope that doesn't mean your faith changes, right? I hope your resolve to love and trust Christ grows as the animosity grows, and your resolve to love and have the treasure of life grows as your worldly riches are stripped away, right? Because you've been given the good thing, the new thing, the covenant that is made here, that is kind of brought back up in Abraham, that swirls throughout Scripture, the one who's going to return and destroy this earth again and yet again make it new, right? That's coming. And so it's grim, right? These have been bleak, sad, hard weeks. But the problem is we don't think that we're like in the days of Noah, right? Like, but if we're not careful, we're going to be lulled to sleep by the sins of this world. And then the flood's going to come, and I know that there's lots of people in our churches that are going to be floating in the water and not in the boat, right? Because their faith is not in the boat, right? Their faith is not in the God who provides. Their faith is in what God has provided for them, things that they've gotten, the blessings that they've enjoyed, right? And when the call comes, they're going to be clinging to their stuff, confused, thinking, well, God wants me to be happy, right? Well, this is the stuff that makes me happy. right? You see it over and over again, churches compromising, right? Like God doesn't want our nonprofit status taken away. God doesn't want us to look bad in newspapers and media. So let's compromise on our beliefs about this or that or this, right? Like, because they're holding on to the things that they think are important and letting God float away, right? Don't do that. I think that, like more than the lesson on be like Noah, don't be like the generation. It's see this scene and understand it and live according to that understanding. Jesus is worth it. He's better than all of the junk on this world. He's better than all the praise. He's better than all the jobs and connections that you can get, because he's the treasure of life. And in eternity, all of these things will be forgotten. Right? Like all these things will be forgotten, and the true joy that you're seeking from them you'll actually have. Right? Like Jesus does intend to satisfy you today and forever. So trust in him. Trust in him. Don't be like the people in the days of Noah, giving in marriage and marrying with no regard for God, thinking that they have the good thing. Actually have the good thing. If you're in here, or if you're listening and you don't have Christ and you don't know what this means, I want to talk to you about it. Like, I want you to have the good thing, because I know the things of this world have let you down. I know that you're kind of floating with them and it's sinking, and like you're looking at it like, is this stuff really worth it? It just keeps me kind of from life. It keeps me from truth. And I don't know. I want you guys to and know that your friends right now who don't know Jesus are freaking out, right? This is a time their jobs have been taken away, their graduations, their internships, their plans, their hopes, their dreams, plus all the social unrest, plus all the disease and different things going on. People are devastated. Give them hope in Christ. Give them hope in Christ. All right. That is it. Do we have a paper plate award for Jonathan? We do. And it is, I don't know all these inside jokes, so I apologize if I don't. Benevolent Bagel Einstein. Yeah, I did get this one. There you go, Jonathan. We love you, man. We're so thankful for you. How long have you worked at Einstein's?
Year and a half.
Oh, longer than that. I feel like you've been bringing giant bags of bagels here for a long time.
I do know we at one point we did have bagels come in.
I'm sorry. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, man. Love you. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and close this off. I'm gonna end the stream. Actually, no. I'm gonna do a few announcements. I forgot to do that because of everything going on. And so the first announcement. Are you holding up my announcements I need to make? We are having an LTC, a leadership training conference. That's July 17th and 18th. So it's coming up here in a couple of weeks. And so it's 17th, 6:30 in this building. And then we'll go till the evening's over. And then in the morning, we'll meet back up from 9 and we'll go most likely till about 2 that day. We'll be feeding you in safe, hopeful ways. We'll be having a scavenger hunt and having fun. If you're not on a ministry team and you're like, I don't know what that is, come. It's for you. We're inviting everybody because we have a very strange year. And so if you have someone that's in the ministry that's been around that you think should be on a ministry team, just come. If that first night you're like, nah, this isn't for me, that's great. Don't come back Saturday. No problem, right? We are currently together doing our recruiting and our encouragement and training for the year. And so that's July 17th and 18th. Next, Gail is helping with a intentional prayer time in Civic Plaza. That is this Sunday, and it's going to be from 11 to 1. And it's just praying for what's going on in our country, specifically the racial and the social disruptions that have been going on. So it's going to be a prompted prayer of just praying for our city, praying for the world, asking God to help and bring wisdom and bring clarity. If you want any details about that, just text Gail. She'd love to talk to you. If you don't have Gail's number, text me. If you don't have my number, text Megan. If you don't have Megan's number, text Sophia. If you don't have Sophia's number, text Wyatt. If you don't have Wyatt's number, text anyone else so we can usually get it to you. And so that's happening. That's this Sunday from 11 to 1 at Civic Plaza. And you can go and participate in that time of prayer. Another announcement is that if you want to be a youth liaison, is that it?
Sure.
Connect with Megan. If you want to be intentional with helping the incoming freshmen of your church get connected to our ministry and get connected to campus, text Megan. We'd like to get you information about how you can do that and how you can help us do that. And so other than that, if you have not signed these plaques yet, there's not a lot of us here this evening, so I'm okay with saying just form a line 6 feet from each other. Please make it a point to sign all of these. We're really grieving over how our seniors have been sent out this year. It's just not how we like doing it. And so we have plaques for them. If you don't know it, great job, congrats, you did it. Whatever corny platitude you want to give, just sign it and say, thank you for being here. And so, like I said, if you haven't signed those things, I'm okay with you making a line, kind of social distancing well. You can exit out that back door. And if not, I'm okay with you safely exiting out this door. I don't feel like I need to release in rows this evening because we're all pretty safe. Yeah, Wyatt?
If you signed last week, we added a couple more.
Okay, so if you've already signed either this week or throughout the summer, we need another sign.
They're gonna be here all summer.
Yeah, they're here. And so if you don't want to do that this evening, that's okay. But we would encourage you to do it. Please do it and honor our seniors and let them know we love them. And so I think that's all the announcements I have. Tower of Babel next week.
As you sign the frames, something that might be wise is to just like choose a marker and let that be your marker while you're signing.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, use the hand sanitizer before, sign, use the hand
Yeah.
sanitizer after, and get out of here. All right, love you guys. Have a good night.
All the time.